Hello and welcome everyone. It is the Transform Your Relationship show. Yes, it's Tuesday. We're back. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Roberta. How are you?
I'm fine, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. We have a great topic today. Of course, as usual, we are talking about safety. I mean, it's been a big topic this month, creating safe. How do you keep yourself safe? Because, you know, if you don't feel safe, you're anxious, and that's not a good place to be. So let's
Yeah.
talk about what does it take to keep yourself safe and create your own safety and be responsible for it. Like, oh, it's actually something I can have some control over it. Would you agree?
Yes, very much. You have some control over it. Other people will do what they do or say what they say or whatever, but you can always look at how do you maintain your own sense of safety, whether that's physical or emotional safety. It's pretty obvious that, here in California, we've just had these incredible and still are having these absolutely ravaging wildfires. How to keep yourself safe if you're in that area is pretty obvious. But how do we keep ourselves safe emotionally?
Hmm.
That's not so obvious.
Yeah, I have a phrase I often say about fear because safety and fear are tied together, right? And I like to say, if you're not in physical danger, you don't need to run away. You really want to face things head on. But if you are in physical danger, run for your life. Like take care of yourself physically. There's no, and you do that, right? In general. Although I have seen people, on the news reports, no, I'm standing my ground. I'm staying with my house. And I don't know what that's all about exactly, other than there's no fear there. The fear is of losing stuff is greater than losing your life. I don't know.
Yeah, I think some people too have subconscious wishes. They know that they're risking their life. And that is a very complex emotional thing to brief, and not in the moment when someone's saying evacuate. But then other people just get caught and they do the best that they can and they to keep themselves safe. Like many people were jumping into swimming pools because it happened so quickly that the only thing they could do was jump into a swimming pool and submerge themselves as much as possible and let the fire pass them.
Wow, that's a benefit of having a swimming pool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a number one benefit this week of having a swimming pool in Southern California.
Well, it's always good to have that in your backyard. All right, I don't want to make light of it, but I know it's been a serious time, and people are in danger in general. And when it comes to keeping yourself safe from toxic people, where do we start?
Well, first of all, you have to start within because you have to notice those feelings. If you are all about give, 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 which is certainly prized in our society among people who think that that's the way to do things, you may override your feelings when you're feeling hurt or when somebody is not listening to you and they misinterpret what you say, and so you make it your fault instead of realizing that maybe the other person isn't listening. There is little things like that that you have to begin to notice. Ooh, ouch, that hurt. Or, oh, it doesn't feel good to be misunderstood or misinterpreted. Or, that person does it frequently. What's up here? To begin to notice what's going on within you so that you become aware of when you're uncomfortable and why.
It's like the giver needs to learn to give to themselves first.
A lot like that. But give at least pay as much attention to yourself as you pay to other people.
Yeah. There's too much. I think I think people are paying attention to themselves, but they're paying attention to their fear self. Like, oh my gosh, what will this person, think, or how can I control the situation so they do this so I can feel that? I think there's always an underlying thing, but we're not really, like you said, paying attention to it or acknowledging it to ourselves. Why, what is driving our actions? What is the underlying thing? Because once we understand that, we can then question it and say, is that really for the benefit of my safety, of my best interest, of their best interest? Because if you're a giver and you keep giving and you feel like a doormat, you are giving them permission to do that over and over and over again. The more people
Well,
that start, taking care of themselves and saying, no, I don't want to be a doormat. I don't need to give all the time. I can also receive, or I can give to myself. The less we have this proliferating. Would you agree?
oh, I think so, but I don't think it's a simple matter at all.
No.
It sounds so simple, but it's just not easy. I mean, if we have patterns from our families that say, well, just think about the major pattern of parenting is the children are supposed to do what the parents want them to do so the parents are pleased. And that's the basic dynamic. Well, if you don't grow up from that and
Mm,
you don't say, I don't have to live up to the expectations and demands of other people or the obligations or burdens that I'm feeling to make other people happy, right from the time you're a tiny baby, you got to keep those giants happy because they feed you, right? And if you don't grow up beyond that and say, no, that's my job now, and I get to determine when I'm pleased and what pleases me and whom I please, then you haven't taken on the individuation that you could have. So you may still be back in that place of, supposed to keep everybody happy, and then, life is better. And so we don't want to become either pretzels or doormats because both of those things are way too much work and you don't feel good about yourself at any time. And everybody else is more important than you are in your own mind. And that's just not true.
amen. You are valuable and worthy and have some contribution. And I think that once people say that to themselves, and acknowledge that there is valuable contribution that anybody else in their life or in the world, um, they get to be that contribution. It's like you're saying yourself you don't want to give of the greatness that you have inside of the gifts you have. So I love that we're starting to talk about it, and I agree it's totally not easy. I like to make things sound simple, I guess, is so, but it's far from it. I think people misinterpret me a lot when I say that, but I want them to be able to access the concept so then they can go deeper. It's like
Mm-hmm.
telling a baby, this is something sweet. Okay, and then we can go, what does sweet mean? How much sweet should we have? Like we can go deeper and deeper into what are the ingredients in sweetness, what types of sweet do you like and not like, natural versus synthetic. You can get as deep as you want, but we've got to start somewhere that's
Mm-hmm.
accessible to
Yeah, and
people.
I think it's important to hear the concepts. I just want everybody listening to don't feel like you failed because it's not easy. It takes work, it takes attention, and we get very busy and then we get rewounded and then maybe we pay attention again. I'm just inviting you to pay attention to the feelings that you're having, pay attention to the responses that you have to certain things, and then spend some time thinking about it. Certainly take responsibility for it because it's what you're doing, but know that it can change. There are things that you can do to change it, and then you can decide if you want to change it.
Yeah.
I've said so many times on our show and everywhere that the most important thing I can teach anyone is this: the truth is what you do. And that's a double-sided coin. On the one side, the truth is what I do. And the other side is I have to believe that the truth about you is what you do, whomever you may be. And I'm not here to change you. I'm here to watch, observe, and decide if I want to interact with you. And we get that opportunity, but often we don't revisit it. We're in patterns, habits, and so we don't think, oh, I don't want to talk to that person. It's always a problem. And yet we pick up the phone and out of duty or obligation and say, well, hi, how are you? And and we're kind of looking at our watch with one hand thinking, well, I'm doing what I should do. And as an emotional growing up, those shoulds are off the table. You do what is a reflection of your values and the internal conversation you're having with yourself and the decisions you make about that. So to keep yourself safe, I mean, sometimes to keep yourself safe is to make a call and say, I need help or I need something. And sometimes to keep yourself safe is to not do it for fear because you don't want to do it, or you feel you may be rejected, or you don't feel the person has it to give to you. And so it would be inappropriate to do it. So there's all kinds of decisions that we have to make about where does our emotional safety lie, and then take responsibility for stepping up and making sure that we make our life emotionally safe.
Take a deep breath. That was awesome. We can experience something better. And if you're listening here and you want to share what your experience is or a question that's coming up as a result, that would help us guide you, and we're here for you. So being safe is something, what I'm hearing, Rhoberta, and what I believe is that we can have an impact on based upon the choices we make. And
Mm-hmm.
it all starts with identifying what we're feeling, because sometimes we have these automatic, reactions versus choice. And I always like to say the key to change starts with awareness,
Sure.
right?
And the fact is that you have to get in touch with yourself and give your feelings and your thoughts credibility to yourself. So if there's some person that they kind of have this little dread feeling, like you like many things about them, but you kind of don't want to call them because it's going to be Debbie Downer, it's going to be this or that, or they're going to find some backhanded way to blame you for something. Haven't you had that kind of person in your life? Maybe it's somebody as simple as this. You're listening to them intently and they are telling you their position on something, and then you decide to agree with them. And as you agree with them and say, yeah, I've thought that often, they go off on another tangent in another direction, because they don't want to be agreed with. They want to have power over you. So when you come to say, oh yeah, I feel that way too, then they say, oh yeah, but I think many people, that's really not a good way to go. And now you're left there hanging, that you just thought that you were agreeing with them. And sometimes those very people are unsafe to be around, because that's the first indication to realize that they always have to be right. They always have to be in charge. They have to have the power of the conversation or the relationship. And I'm not saying all of them, of course, but these are the things we have to notice in order to learn to keep ourselves emotionally safe. And I don't mean that by putting up, a whole bunch of protection. I mean it on a case by case basis, person by person basis, situation by situation basis. And when you finally come to a place where you no longer feel safe around a person, then you stop the relationship. But
You go ahead.
it's just important to be self-aware, as you said. That's the beginning. And then to calibrate, like, what's really going on here?
And it's really interesting because I've seen people who, want to be right, so that's their whole MO, their whole way they operate. They have to be right. And the minute you agree with them, they either feel good or they feel like, oh, I don't have to fight anymore, right? So I once heard from a physician, they says, the best way to diffuse a situation is to agree with that person, right? Like, because that sometimes is a good way to do it. When is it a good idea to agree, and when is it maybe not such a good idea?
Well, it's a good question. I teach negotiation in the MBA program at the University of Texas, and I'm always telling people, one good thing to do when you're creating a relationship or you're beginning a negotiation is to find the genuine small piece that you can thoroughly agree with and speak about that. Because then you're not giving blanket approval or agreeing with everything. You're choosing something that you can genuinely agree with, even if everything about the other person is obnoxious and you have to have a conversation with them, perhaps at work or something. If you can find that one thing, it gives a little moment it in your brain, what happens is it disinhibits the neocortex for a minute. They thought you were going to argue with them, so they're bang, 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 bang. You agree, and they go, and you got a few seconds there before they regroup. And so it's a good thing to try to use to find that genuine thing you can agree with. When I'm working with couples that are fighting a lot, we use that technique. Is there something in there you could genuinely agree with?
And get
Let's
on the
use
same side of the fence with
yeah.
them.
Let's use that as the starting point, and then we'll use some different strategies for continuing the conversation in a more effective and productive manner.
Yeah, I think it really sets a tone and it can disarm somebody from wanting to bulldoze if they're reasonable, if they're not what you call a hijackal. At least it diffuses it to some degree so you can have a conversation. I think sometimes people get into conversations, they push each other's buttons. They're not looking for those commonalities, whereas the commonality could bring them together. That's wisdom.
Yeah, well, just think about our upbringing. You know, did you win with the parents, or did you do what they wanted you to do? And did you ever then, maybe when you're individuating somewhere between 14 and 18, was that okay? Do your parents say, "Oh, I didn't know you felt that way," or "Let's talk about that," and they accept you as having some sense of autonomy and they hand that over to you? Or were you raised by parents who constantly wanted you to be who they wanted you to be, do what you wanted them to do, and they made you wrong if you didn't? Those patterns will carry over into your life if you haven't stopped to say, do I want this pattern to continue?
And at 14, I know I couldn't express what I was feeling. I had a lot of feelings. I couldn't identify them and I couldn't express them. So, how could I even deal with, a parent to say, wait, I have these feelings. So they didn't know I had these feelings. They just saw the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like the behavior. They
No.
put a kibosh on it. So we learn not to go to our feelings. And I think that's what the message today is: become aware of those feelings so you can start to have them speak on your behalf.
Yeah, and that's why it's an inside job,
Exactly.
and in the Kaizen for Couples book, I write all the time about the personal weather report. We've talked about it so many times, but it is so basic. You have the right as an adult. You have the right as a child too, but somebody may not give you that right. But as an adult, you have the right to say what you think, feel, need, and want. And that has to be said without any reference to another human. So you never say the word you. You're not talking about anybody else. You're giving a weather report of what's going on in here. And when you learn to accord yourself that, this is when the magic begins to happen. Like, I have a right to take up space and draw a breath and say what I think, feel, need, and want, as long as I'm not making assumptions or presumptions or accusing anybody else. I am just talking about what's going on within me. And you could say, wow, I feel really unsafe right now. What do you
Mm.
think that would do in a conversation? Now, if you're with a hijackal, they would say, well, there you go again. You don't have any self-confidence, do you? But if you're with a relatively healthy person, they say, oh, what's making you feel unsafe? And then you can have a conversation, or why don't you feel safe? And then you learn about the other person, which goes back to what I said earlier. You're 100% responsible for teaching people how to treat you. And what I said earlier today, which is the truth is what you do. So you watch somebody and their behavior, and then you say, oh, okay, that's who they are. That's how they behave. Now I make a choice if I want to interact with them and at what level. And that's the way I will keep myself emotionally safe.
And sometimes I feel like I can't express my feelings if I don't have an intention. Like I can acknowledge my feelings.
Mm.
So if I were to feel unsafe, I feel unsafe here. Um, it would be feel very unsafe to say that unless I had an intention of a request, like you said, know what you want from the outcome, right? So if I take the step further from, okay, for me, it's very unsafe to go in and just say that to somebody because I don't know whether they're a hijackal. I don't know whether they're going to ask me the right question because they may not think what's making me unsafe. But if I know what I want as an outcome and I can make a request of that,
Sure.
then I can, at least I feel like I have a sense of what I'd like and I can drive it to. Sometimes I have to sit with my feelings so long to say, yeah, I know I'm feeling this, but what is it that I want? What would help me get out of this or get to where I want to be from a place of fear to a place of confidence or joy? It's like, okay, well, can that person provide me something that might help me get there? Is it just for them to, can I make a request for them not to criticize me? Can I make a request for them to offer me more positive? Could I let them know I can't, be in touch as much? Or, is there a way for them to be in touch more? So depending on what it is that I want, then I know I can have a conversation.
Mhm.
Otherwise, if I'm not really clear what I want, who knows what's going to come out of my mouth?
Yeah, and I think that's true on both sides of the equation because the other person is hearing this for the first time and maybe they're in a bad place or they feel insecure or they're defensive. And so bringing it up causes a problem.
Right.
So they can't hear it and they certainly can't hear it in the way that you intended it to be heard. So many times it's a good idea to spend the time. Well, it's always a good idea to spend the time with yourself and figure out what you just said, Laura, but then to be able to say, I feel unsafe, and what would make me feel more safe is this, and make it a two-part statement. So then you're not creating uncertainty in the situation, which addresses what you were saying, because only I know what will make me feel more safe.
And to wait for somebody and expect somebody to ask that is putting a lot of pressure on them and not taking it where you want to go necessarily. And then that leads to the unfulfilled expectations that we put on our partners and friends for, like, they should be, if you really loved me, then you would do this, of course.
That's right. And none of our friends are mind readers.
Right.
And none of our partners for sure are mind readers. And so we are 100% responsible for speaking up and teaching people how to treat us. And maybe sometimes we're not quite ready to speak up. Maybe we're just formulating a feeling. And then that's a good indication to go inside and say, all right, something's brewing here and I'm not feeling great. What are my options? What do I want to do about it? You know, it's a different way of approaching it because we get all out here about things like, oh, they're not doing this and they don't care, or they're thoughtless, or they're this or they're that. That's a completely different thing than having a conversation with yourself that says, well, I'm feeling unsafe right now. I'm acknowledging to me that I feel unsafe right now. And when I'm ready, I'll acknowledge it to somebody else that I feel unsafe right now. But you have to be ready to have that conversation and to know that there's time to have that conversation. Many times I find that people will blurt something out like that, and there's no time to have the conversation. They're right in the middle of doing something else. The other person is blindsided, and there's nowhere to go with that. So it's very unsatisfying. So back to your point, Laura, self-awareness is the beginning of it. We're adults. We can delay our gratification. To be able to give a weather report and say, I feel this way, is a good thing. But if you think somebody else is going to say, oh, well, that's too bad, and have some caring thought, maybe they're not receptive to that right now. You just put the weather report out there. They do with it what they do, and then you calibrate who they are by what they chose to do. And then you learn something about the other person. And when that interaction goes on, that's called having a relationship.
The point is, we all have choice.
Yeah.
And we have choice to create what we want in our lives, whether we want to do that or there's feelings that are preventing us from doing that. It's all to become aware of and just take responsibility for it so that you can move toward the things you really want in life and away from the things or the patterns that have kept you in a place you don't like. So if you really want to get to that place of peace and safety, there are things and steps you can take, and it doesn't have to be super hard. It may be a little scary, but here's the deal. Our fear, if you're not in physical danger, is an illusion in the sense that it's not going to kill you, right? So
Mhm.
if you're not in physical danger, then take a breath into that and be brave and feel what you're feeling and explore what you want and be kind to yourself in the process and see what emerges. See if we can follow some of what we're saying. And one of the things I really want to capitalize on what you're saying, Rhoberta, is it's not always going to be a picnic. And it's okay. It might be a little bit of a roller coaster. Keep breathing, and you don't have to do it alone. This is the good news. This is one of the reasons we do that. Now, Rhoberta has an amazing site, forrelationshiphelp.com. She has resources there up the wazoo. If give you hope, inspiration, and then of course you have your complimentary consultation, and you can always work one-on-one. I do hypnosis and do business consulting to help you get where you want to go in your business. I always take into account where you are personally, because you can't move forward professionally until you know where you are personally. And sometimes you're ready, and sometimes there's a few things you got to clear out of the way. So Rhoberta and I have great tools for you, and you can find me at transformtoday.com. Well,
I just want to add something, Laura, because we brought up hijackals. And if you feel like there's somebody in your life who you're really not safe around, yet they're putting on a different persona when they're out in the world, making everybody think they're wonderful and the salt of the earth and the most generous spirit available. But to you, they are constantly a difficulty, constantly creating chaos, constantly creating uncertainty, making you wrong for everything. Notice that. I have to put in a little word about that, because if that's a pattern for you, you are not safe. It is not an illusion. You are not emotionally safe, and you may need help for that.
good point. Here are the websites again that you can go to get more support, information, find out how you can be more safe. We are here for you, for relationshiphelp.com and transformtoday.com. We will be back with you in another 2 weeks with another message. In the meantime, feel free to be in touch with us on Facebook. We're here for you. And have a great day. Anything else?
Yes, indeed, and keep yourself emotionally safe.
Bye for now.